Welcome. This channel is all about growing, learning, and discovering something new every day. If you're ready to improve and stay inspired, hit subscribe and join in.
My name is Margaret Elaine Calloway. I am 63 years old, and until 18 months ago, I believed that the most dangerous thing about working the late shift at a pharmacy was the fluorescent lighting. I had spent 31 years as a registered nurse at Mercy General Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I retired when my knees started telling me things I did not want to hear. But after 6 months of sitting inside my apartment, watching the same 3 cooking shows and reorganizing my linen closet twice, I realized that retirement and I were not getting along. I needed to be somewhere. I needed to be useful. So I took a part-time position at a 24-hour pharmacy on the east side of town, working the evening shift from 4 in the afternoon until midnight. My daughter thought I had lost my mind. She called from Phoenix every Sunday and asked me the same question in 7 different ways. Why would I do that to myself? Did I not work hard enough for 31 years? Was I trying to end up back in the hospital, but this time as a patient? I told her I was fine. I told her I liked staying busy. What I did not tell her was that the apartment got very quiet after 8 o'clock, and quiet had become something I was afraid of. I had been divorced for 11 years. My ex-husband and I had not ended badly, just slowly, the way a candle burns down until there is nothing left. We were civil to each other at our daughter's wedding 3 years ago and shook hands in the parking lot afterward. That was the last time I saw him. I did not miss the marriage. I missed the sound of another person in the next room. So I worked my shifts. I caught the Route 16 bus at 3:15 in the afternoon and rode it to the pharmacy. At midnight, when my shift ended, I called a car service. Always the same company, Riverside Dispatch, because the dispatcher knew my name and always confirmed the driver before I walked out the door. That was something my 31 years in nursing had taught me. Small precautions add up. For about 4 months, I was assigned the same driver almost every night. His name was Walter. He was 68, a widower, drove a dark green sedan that smelled faintly of peppermint. He wore a flat cap and kept gospel music on low the whole ride. He never talked much, but he always waited until I was through the front door of my building before he pulled away from the curb. I noticed that. I appreciated it. I started bringing him coffee. Nothing fancy, just a cup from the machine in the pharmacy break room, 2 sugars and a little cream, the way he mentioned once in passing that he liked it. I would hand it through the window when I got in, and he would nod and say, "You didn't have to do that, Miss Margaret." And I would say, "I know." That was how it went, 4 nights a week, for months. The building I lived in was called Hargrove Terrace. It was not glamorous. 6 floors, brick exterior that had been painted over too many times, a small lobby with a security panel that beeped when you entered. The overnight custodian was a man named Gerald. Gerald worked from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, cleaning the common areas, taking out trash, fixing the small things that the building manager pretended not to notice. He was 61, quiet, thick-shouldered. With reading glasses, he kept pushed up on his forehead, even when he wasn't reading anything. I started seeing Gerald every night when I came home after midnight. He was always somewhere in the lobby, or the hallway near the elevator, mop bucket nearby, or kneeling beside a light fixture that had been flickering for 2 weeks. We started exchanging the kind of greetings that stretch into small conversations. "How was your night? Can you believe this weather? Did you hear about the water pressure on the 4th floor?" Eventually, I learned that he had a daughter in Memphis named Renee, that they had not spoken in almost 3 years, and that the reason sat somewhere between his pride and her patience, and he could not quite get them to meet in the middle. He did not elaborate on the details, and I did not ask. Some things you hold at arm's length until a person is ready to set them down. What I did do was start bringing him food. I cooked on my days off, Real cooking, the kind my mother had done. Big pots of things that lasted. On the nights I came home from the pharmacy, I would bring a container of whatever I had made. Chicken stew, black-eyed peas, cornbread wrapped in foil that was still a little warm. I would set it on the folding table he kept near the supply closet and say, "Don't let it sit too long." He would look at it and then look at me and say, "Miss Margaret, you are going to make me fat." I told him it was better than whatever he was eating from that vending machine on the second floor. He laughed every time like it was the first time I had said it. This went on for almost 7 months. Now I need to tell you about my ex-husband's nephew. His name was Dennis, and I had not seen him in nearly 4 years. He had shown up at my ex-husband's retirement party a while back, younger than both of us by 15 years, loud in the way that people are loud when they want to make sure you notice them. He had a way of standing close to whatever conversation he was not part of. My ex-husband had always kept a polite distance from him, more out of habit than affection. Dennis had borrowed money from the family more than once and returned it less than once. What I did not know, what I had no reason to know, was that Dennis had recently moved to Columbus. He had taken a room in a house about 6 blocks from Hargrove Terrace, and somewhere in his mind, he had constructed a story in which I owed him something. The story went like this. When my ex-husband's mother passed away 4 years ago, there had been a small estate. My ex-husband inherited the majority. Dennis, who was a nephew by his mother's second marriage and had never been close to the family, received nothing. This was not surprising to anyone who knew the family. But Dennis had apparently decided that because I was the ex-wife, because I had been present for some of those family years, because I was a woman living alone in an apartment on the east side, that I must have access to something he deserved. It was not rational, but grievances rarely are. I did not know any of this was happening. The first thing I noticed was a car. It was a silver compact, and I noticed it because I am the kind of person who notices things out of place. It was parked across from the pharmacy 2 nights in a row, idling, no delivery markings, no reason to be there at 11:45 at night. The second night, I thought I saw someone looking toward the pharmacy entrance. I could not see clearly through the glass from where I was standing at the register. I told myself it was nothing. A person waiting to pick someone up. Columbus was not a small town. The third time I saw the car, it was not outside the pharmacy. It was parked half a block from Hargrove Terrace. I noticed it as Walter's car slowed to the curb. I was reaching for the door handle when I saw it sitting there under the streetlight. Same silver compact. I could not make out the plate in the dark, but there was a small dent in the rear bumper, the same dent I had noted before without consciously noting it. I went inside. I told myself it was a coincidence. But I have been a nurse for 31 years. I know what it means when something does not feel right even before you can explain why. I started watching more carefully. The car appeared twice more that week, not always in the same place, but always within eye line of somewhere I had been. I did not tell my daughter. She would have called the police, and then called me every 2 hours, and I did not yet have anything to tell the police, except a feeling. I did not tell anyone at the pharmacy. I kept my routine, I kept my head up, and I kept noticing. It was on a Thursday night in the middle of November that everything changed. Walter pulled up at midnight as always. The night was cold and damp, the kind of cold that settles into your shoulders before you've been outside 20 seconds. I handed him his coffee through the window, buckled my seatbelt, and we pulled out onto the street. We were about 4 blocks from Hargrove Terrace when Walter did not take the left turn onto Morrison Avenue. He kept straight. I said, "Walter, you missed the turn." He said, "I know, Miss Margaret. Give me a minute." I have been around enough people in crisis to know the difference between confusion and deliberateness. His voice was deliberate. His hands on the wheel were steady. I did not panic, but I sat up straighter and I said, "What is going on?" he said. "That silver car was parked outside the pharmacy again tonight. And it pulled out 30 seconds after we did." I turned around slowly. I could not see anything definitive in the dark behind us, just headlights at a normal distance. Walter said, "I have been watching it for over a week." I recognized it the first time because it did the same thing the week before. Pulled out right after us, stayed back a few car lengths, turned off when we got to your block. He glanced in the rear-view mirror and then at me. "Tonight it stayed on the street. It parked down from your building, and the engine stayed running for 11 minutes. I drove around the block twice to check." I sat very still. He said, "I don't want to frighten you, but I have been driving people home late at night for 12 years, and I have seen enough to know when something is wrong." I asked him if he had seen the driver. He said he had, briefly, when the car passed under a light. A man, younger than us, dark jacket. I did not say Dennis's name out loud yet, but it was in my mind like a stone. Walter drove to a well-lit gas station 4 blocks away and parked under the overhead lights. We sat there while he called the dispatch company and reported what he had seen, giving the description and approximate plate. I sat with my hands folded in my lap and thought carefully. I thought about the retirement party. I thought about the estate. I thought about the way Dennis had stood at the edge of conversations, watching. I thought about the fact that my ex-husband had mentioned once, offhand, in a voicemail last spring, that Dennis had gotten himself into some financial trouble and was not handling it well. I had not thought much about it at the time. I thought about all of it very carefully, and by the time I was done thinking, I was no longer unsure. Walter took me back to Hargrove Terrace by a different route. The silver car was not there. He walked me to the lobby door, which was something he had never done before. I thanked him and he said, "Lock up tight." Gerald was in the lobby when I came in. He looked at my face and set down his mop handle. He said, "You all right?" I told him. "Not everything, but enough. The car, the week of following, the man I thought it might be." Gerald listened without interrupting, which is rarer than people think. When I finished, he said, "I've seen that car." I looked at him. He said, 3 times this week, parked out on the street. I walk the exterior perimeter at 11 o'clock every night, building policy after the break-in 2 years ago. I noticed it the first time because the engine was running and no one got out. Figured it was someone waiting on a resident. Second time, same car, different night, same thing. Third time, I wrote down the plate number. He walked to the supply closet and pulled out a folded piece of paper from the shelf where he kept his logbook. He handed it to me. I held it in both hands. I said, "Gerald, this is important. Would you be willing to talk to the police?" He said, "Already planning on it. I want to tell you that I felt safe in that moment, and I did, but I also want to tell you something true, which is that I spent the rest of that night sitting in my apartment with the chain locked and the lights on, and I did not sleep until past 4 in the morning. My daughter called that Sunday," I told her. She was on a flight 2 days later. The police took the plate number Gerald had recorded and traced it to a rental agreement under a name that matched Dennis's. A detective made contact with my ex-husband, who confirmed the family situation and the financial trouble, and said, without much surprise in his voice, that he had been concerned about Dennis's state of mind for several months. He provided context that the detective said was helpful. What came out over the following 2 weeks was that Dennis had found my address through an old family document and had been watching my routine for nearly a month. He had not done anything overtly criminal yet, but he had made 2 calls to my ex-husband in the weeks before, one of which included a reference to me that my ex-husband had dismissed at the time as bitter talk. With Walter's report, Gerald's log, and my ex-husband's testimony, the detective was able to establish a pattern of stalking under Ohio law. Dennis was located at his rooming house and taken in for questioning. He was subsequently charged. I will not tell you that the legal process was fast or clean, because it was not. It took months, and there were days when I was tired of it, tired of the statements and the waiting and the small indignities of having your privacy examined. My daughter stayed for 3 weeks and then flew back to Phoenix and called me every single day for 2 months, which is more than she had called in the previous year combined, and I did not point that out because I was glad to hear her voice. What I will tell you is that Walter and Gerald were both called to give statements, and both of them did, without hesitation, without complaint, with the kind of steady calm that I had always admired in people who knew what they were about. I brought Walter a full meal, not just coffee, the next time I saw him. His wife had passed 4 years ago, and his son lived in Atlanta and called on holidays. We sat in the parking lot of the pharmacy for 20 minutes after my shift and ate chicken and rice from plastic containers and talked about things that had nothing to do with any of this, about his late wife's garden, about the first car he ever owned. It was one of the better conversations I had had in years. Gerald was different after everything settled. Not in a bad way. Something in him had loosened, the way a door loosens when the weather finally shifts and it swings open without you having to push. One night in February, about 3 months after all of it, he was quiet for longer than usual, and then he said that he had called his daughter in Memphis. I said, "And?" He said, "She cried." I cried. We talked for 2 hours. I did not say anything for a moment. Then I said, "What are you doing for Easter?" He looked at me. I said, "Because if you don't have plans, I think you should get yourself a bus ticket to Memphis." He was quiet. Then he said, "You think she'd want that?" I said, "She cried for 2 hours, Gerald." He went to Memphis in April. He called me from a rest stop somewhere in Tennessee to tell me his daughter had made his favorite meal and that his granddaughter, who was 4 years old, had climbed into his lap within 20 minutes of him walking through the door and fallen asleep. His voice on the phone was something I have not forgotten and will not forget. It was the voice of a man who had been carrying something a long time and had finally been allowed to set it down. I still work the evening shift at the pharmacy. My knees are no better, but they are no worse. My daughter visits twice a year now instead of once, and we have learned how to talk to each other in a way that we did not quite manage when she was growing up, which I suppose is one of the gifts that comes late if you are patient enough to wait for it. Walter still picks me up most nights. He switches between gospel and old-school soul depending on his mood, and I have learned that gospel means he is reflective and soul means he is in a good humor, and I adjust my conversation accordingly. I still bring him coffee. He still says I didn't have to. I still say I know. Gerald is on better terms with Renee now. He has a photograph of his granddaughter on the folding table by the supply closet next to his logbook. The little girl's name is Joy, which I think is just about the most exactly right name I have ever heard. I have been asked, since all of this, whether I was frightened, whether I wish I had noticed sooner, whether I feel angry. The honest answers are yes sometimes, and not as much as you might expect. Anger takes energy, and I am a practical person. What I feel more than anger is grateful. Grateful for a man who paid attention from the driver's seat of a dark green sedan. Grateful for a man who walked the building perimeter every night at 11 because it was the right thing to do. Grateful that my small habits, the coffee, the chicken stew, the 2 minutes of real conversation in a lobby late at night, had built something I could not have planned and did not know I would need. I did not bring Walter coffee because I wanted to be saved. I did not bring Gerald food because I expected something in return. I did those things because they were small and easy, and because someone was there and kindness was available. That is the whole of it. There is no larger strategy. There is only the decision made again and again to see the person in front of you as worth the small effort. My mother used to say that you never know which thread is holding the whole thing together until something pulls on it. I think about that now when I come through the lobby door after midnight, and Gerald looks up from whatever he is working on and nods, and I think about it when I slide into the back seat of Walter's car and hand a cup of coffee through the gap between the front seats. And I think about it when my daughter calls on a Wednesday, which she never used to do, just to talk. It is not a dramatic thing I am describing. It is a very ordinary thing. That is exactly why it matters. Be kind to the person who is simply there, not because the world will reward you, not because you will need them someday, but because they are a person, and you are a person, and the night is long and a small warmth costs you almost nothing, and means, sometimes, everything. That is the whole story. That is all of it. And I am still here to tell it.